In the endless dark of space, a signal began to travel, weak, broken, and full of fear. It moved through the silent emptiness between the stars, bouncing across old satellites and abandoned beacons until it finally reached the edge of the known galaxy. The signal carried a desperate message, a cry for help from a world that was dying. The planet was called Zitharon, home of the Zithari, a gentle and peaceful race that had once lived in perfect harmony with their world. They built their cities among glowing trees and crystal mountains, and their technology was made to heal, not harm. They believed in peace and understanding and in the beauty of life. But now their beautiful world was falling apart. For many years the Zithari had lived without war. They did not build weapons or armies. Their leaders believed that conflict belonged to lesser civilizations. But that belief broke when the Dravkor came. The Dravkor were a race of conquerors, cold and merciless, feeding on power and destruction. They had no mercy, no compassion. Their only purpose was to take, to burn, and to rule. When their warships appeared in the skies of Zitharon, the Zithari realized too late that peace alone could not save them. At first, the Zithari tried to talk. They sent transmissions of peace and surrender, hoping the invaders would listen. But the Dravkor only laughed. They began to destroy everything: the floating cities, the forests of light, the healing towers. Within days, millions were dead. The survivors hid underground, trembling as their world burned above them. The sky turned black from smoke and the air became poison. The Zithari, once full of pride and knowledge, became shadows of fear. It was then that the scientists of Zitharon gathered for one final act. In the deepest lab beneath the planet's surface, they created a beacon. It was ancient technology, meant to reach far beyond their own galaxy, a distress signal that would carry a single message: "Help us, we are dying." They sent the signal into the void, not knowing if anyone would ever hear it. They didn't know who might come or if they would be too late. All they had left was hope. Days turned into weeks. The Dravkor spread across the planet like a disease. Whole cities were turned to ashes. Families vanished. The oceans boiled with fire. The Zithari prayed to their ancestors, begging for deliverance. The signal kept traveling, jumping through space like a faint heartbeat, the last heartbeat of a dying world. Far away, across billions of miles, a human listening post caught the signal. It was deep in the outer rim, a place where humans rarely paid attention to alien noise. But this one was different. The computer struggled to translate it, but the message was clear enough. Someone was calling for help. The officer on duty, a tired man named Lyre Holt, listened to the repeating message, his heart sinking. The tone, the panic, the emotion, it wasn't just a signal. It was a scream. He sent the report up the chain, unaware of the storm he had just awakened. On Earth's main command station, the message was analyzed, decoded, and confirmed. The coordinates led to Zitharon, a planet outside the regular trade routes. Data from exploration archives showed it as a peaceful civilization. No history of violence. The humans had never made contact before, but the distress signal was undeniable. The Council of Commanders met within hours. Debates rose. Some said it wasn't their problem. Others said they couldn't ignore a cry for help. But one voice silenced the room. Admiral Reyes, commander of the Deathworlder expeditionary fleet. He spoke quietly, but every word carried weight. "If they're asking for help," he said, "then we go." The name Deathworlders wasn't a title humans gave themselves. It was what other species called them: survivors from the most dangerous planet ever classified. Earth, a world filled with volcanoes, storms, predators, and diseases, had shaped its children into something fierce. Where other species evolved to avoid danger, humans learned to face it. Where others fled, humans adapted. They were the galaxy's paradox, creatures capable of great kindness and terrible violence. And now those creatures were preparing to answer a call from a dying world. When the Zithari's signal reached them, the humans didn't send diplomats. They didn't wait for approval from the Galactic Union. Within hours, ships began to launch from orbiting docks. Massive carriers, sleek destroyers, and dark cruisers bearing the mark of Earth Command. The fleet moved like a living thing, engines glowing blue against the darkness. Each ship carried soldiers, medics, engineers, and supplies. They didn't know what waited for them on Zitharon, but it didn't matter. Someone needed help. That was enough. Back on Zitharon, the last surviving Zithari huddled in caves beneath the surface. The once bright world had become a graveyard. Every tremor above shook dust from the ceilings, and every sound made them flinch. The leaders of the council sat together, their glowing eyes dim with sorrow. "No one is coming," one of them whispered. "The stars are too far." But another placed a hand on her shoulder and said softly, "We sent the call. The stars always answer, sometimes in ways we do not expect." That night, as another bombardment began, the sky above Zitharon changed. Among the fire and smoke, strange new lights appeared. At first, the Zythari thought it was another attack. The lights grew brighter, dozens, then hundreds of them moving in perfect formation. A low rumble filled the air, deeper than thunder. Then, for the first time in weeks, the bombardment stopped. The Dravkor ships began to scatter. Something had arrived, something powerful. The Zithari crawled from their shelters and looked to the heavens. Through the clouds, they saw the shapes of enormous vessels descending, dark and silent like metal giants. The human fleet had come. The sky glowed with their engines as the first dropships entered the atmosphere. The Zithari could feel the ground shake beneath their feet. They didn't know who these beings were. They didn't know if they were saviors or destroyers. All they knew was that the stars had finally answered. Far above, Admiral Reyes stood on the command bridge of his flagship, Resolute Dawn. Through the viewport, he could see the burning world below. "So this is Zitharon," he murmured. His second-in-command nodded grimly. "Looks like hell, sir." Reyes looked down at the transmission data again. Millions dead, the rest waiting to die. "Then we'll give them a reason to believe in heaven," he said, before turning to his crew. "Deploy all wings. Prepare ground assault teams. Let's show them what Deathworlders do when someone asks for help." As the order went out, the ships began to move into position. Hundreds of pods broke away from the fleet, each carrying soldiers and supplies. The Deathworlders were coming, not with words but with action. The Zithari watched in awe and fear as the first human landing ships touched down near the ruined cities. The sight of these armored figures, tall and scarred, stepping out into the toxic air was something they would never forget. To the Zithari, they looked like monsters from an ancient tale. But to Admiral Reyes, they were hope given form, and somewhere deep underground, the last Zithari scientist who had sent the SOS message received a signal back, a simple transmission that made her hands tremble and her eyes fill with tears. It contained only 4 words, but they carried the strength of an entire world. Message received. Help coming. She fell to her knees, whispering to herself, "The stars, they heard us." The story of that first contact would be remembered for generations, not as a tale of conquest, but of survival, courage, and the strange mercy of the most dangerous beings in the galaxy. The Zithari had sent an SOS, never knowing who would answer. And now, as the Deathworlder fleet filled their skies, they were about to learn that salvation sometimes wears the face of fear. The human fleet moved through the darkness of space like a silent storm, stretching across millions of kilometers as it approached the burning planet Zytheron. To the Zithari, watching from the last surviving observation post, the sight was both terrifying and mesmerizing. They had never imagined that any species could bring such immense power. Ships larger than their tallest towers glided through the sky, engines glowing blue-white, cutting through the smoke and fire left behind by the Dravkor invasion. Every human vessel was built not only for battle but for endurance, capable of surviving the harshest conditions that the universe could throw at them. To the Zithari, it looked like a living, breathing army descending from the stars. On the bridges of these ships, humans moved with calm precision. Admiral Reyes and his officers coordinated their forces, speaking in concise, commanding tones that left no room for doubt. Their strategy was simple but brutal: eliminate the Dravkor quickly, protect the innocent, and survive at all costs. This approach had been drilled into every human soldier for generations. Life on Earth had taught them that survival was not about mercy or hesitation. It was about action, courage, and sometimes doing the unimaginable. And now, they would apply all that hard-earned knowledge on a planet far from their home, in a war they had not started but were determined to finish. When the first human landing ships pierced the atmosphere, the Zithari could hardly believe their eyes. From above, it seemed as though metal titans were walking across the clouds, each ship releasing squads of soldiers, engineers, and medics, directly into the heart of destruction. The humans did not pause to assess the devastation. They simply moved forward, weapons ready. scanning every corner for threats. To the Zithari, this behavior was alien. No one had ever faced danger with such fearless determination. Where their own kind would have hesitated, the humans advanced unbothered by the toxic air, the collapsing buildings, or the bodies strewn across streets. These were beings who had evolved under the harshest conditions imaginable, and their approach to battle reflected that experience. The Dravkor were quick to notice the newcomers. Their leaders, used to striking fear into the hearts of unprepared civilizations, were initially amused. But amusement soon turned to panic. The humans fought differently than anyone the Dravkor had encountered. They did not rely on sheer numbers alone. They combined advanced tactics, clever traps, and coordinated strikes in ways that even seasoned invaders could not predict. Sniper squads disabled enemy artillery before it could fire. Armored units moved like shadows, cutting off supply lines and protecting civilians at the same time. The humans did not hesitate to take risks, moving through dangerous zones to save lives or destroy key targets. For the Zithari, it was the first time they saw an alien species fight with such a combination of intelligence, strength, and fearlessness. In the cities, the Zithari hid in underground tunnels and secret chambers, their hearts pounding with hope and terror. They had never seen war like this. Humans were not just fighting, they were relentless. Each explosion, each strike was calculated, precise, and devastating. Yet at the same time, the humans showed care. Soldiers paused to remove injured Zithari from danger, while medics worked tirelessly to treat wounds that even the Zithari themselves could not have healed. To the besieged aliens, it was bewildering. How could a species capable of such destruction also show such compassion? It was a mystery, one that would linger in their minds for the rest of their lives. Admiral Reyes had to make quick decisions at every turn. The Dravkor were cunning, using the terrain, the ruined cities, and the poisoned atmosphere to their advantage. They hid in tunnels, ambushed patrols, and launched surprise strikes. But the humans adapted. They deployed reconnaissance drones that scanned the area for hidden enemies, used thermal imaging to locate ambushes, and coordinated their forces to encircle the Dravkor before they could strike. Each move was executed with deadly precision. The Zithari watched, awestruck, as humans turned impossible situations into victories. For the first time since the invasion began, they dared to believe they might survive. But the arrival of the humans did not immediately end the suffering. War, even when fought by the most capable soldiers, leaves scars. Entire districts of the Zithari cities were destroyed during the initial assaults. Buildings that had stood for centuries crumbled under the coordinated attacks. Fires spread rapidly, consuming what remained of the once beautiful landscapes. The ground shook under the weight of armored vehicles and crashing enemy craft. For the Zithari, it was a paradox. The same forces that were saving them were also part of the destruction. Yet despite the chaos, they felt a spark of hope. They understood that the humans were not here to conquer or enslave, but to protect and fight. It was a new kind of salvation, one wrapped in steel and fire. The humans themselves were aware of the stakes. Each soldier knew that failure could mean the extinction of an entire civilization. Their training, their instincts, and their brutal upbringing on a harsh world prepared them for this moment. They moved as a unit, coordinating attacks with silent signals and adapting to conditions that would have killed any other species in seconds. Toxic gases, collapsing structures, and sudden ambushes were met with calm efficiency. They treated the planet as both a battlefield and a puzzle, solving each problem with determination and ingenuity. To the Zithari, it seemed almost like magic, human magic born from suffering, resilience, and survival. As the battle unfolded, the Zithari began to learn about their saviors. They observed the humans communicating in rapid bursts, each action deliberate and precise. Their weapons, though destructive, were used with a level of strategy that showed not only skill but understanding. Humans were not just fighters. They were planners, thinkers, and protectors all at once, and in every move there was a strange respect for life. Civilians were prioritized over enemy soldiers whenever possible, and medics risked their own lives to pull the injured from dangerous zones. The Zithari, whose people had never fought like this, found themselves both terrified and grateful. The humans' presence also changed the dynamics of the conflict. The Dravkor, once confident and cruel, were forced to retreat or rethink their strategies. They had underestimated the humans' capabilities and ruthlessness. Battles that had seemed hopeless suddenly turned in favor of the Zithari. Each victory, no matter how small, was a testament to the skill and resilience of the Deathworlders. For the first time, the Zithari dared to hope that the nightmare of the Dravkor might end. And as the humans continued to push forward, moving through ruins, toxic clouds, and enemy lines, the Zithari realized that the beings they had called monsters were, in fact, their salvation. Yet amidst all this, the humans did not stop to celebrate. Every success was a step toward the greater goal, eliminating the Dravkor threat entirely. They repaired and reinforced their own machines and weapons while continuously pushing forward, never pausing for rest. Engineers worked alongside soldiers to make the fleet more efficient. Medics treated the wounded quickly and moved on. Even the youngest recruits, hardened by Earth's harsh realities, performed tasks that would have been impossible for other species. To the Zithari, it was overwhelming. They had never seen a race so completely dedicated to survival and protection, blending mercy with unmatched power. By the end of the first week of human intervention, the tide of battle had shifted. The Dravkor, once overwhelming, were forced into retreat, their supply lines cut, their morale broken. Cities that had been under siege for months were now partially secure. The Zithari began to emerge from their hiding places, watching the humans as they continued to fight, move, and protect. They began to understand the true nature of the beings who had answered their call. These were not ordinary soldiers. They were warriors forged in fire, shaped by adversity, and driven by the simple principle of helping those in need, no matter the cost. As the fleet established control over key areas, the Zithari slowly started to approach the humans. Fear and awe mixed together as they watched the soldiers treat the injured, repair buildings, and prepare for the next assault. In a world that had become synonymous with death, the humans brought not only protection but also a sense of order and hope. They did not promise peace or glory. They offered survival through action, through courage, and through their unmatched willingness to confront danger head-on. For the Zithari, it was a revelation. They had called for help and against all odds received it in the most unexpected form. Admiral Reyes observed the planet from his bridge, his mind always on the next move. Every report, every sensor reading guided his decisions. He understood the importance of timing, coordination, and restraint. Though his fleet was powerful, he also knew that reckless actions could destroy the very civilization they were trying to save. And so he planned meticulously, combining brute force with careful strategy. Every soldier, every ship, every weapon had a purpose. And with each calculated move, the Zithari's faith in their new allies grew stronger. In those first days, the humans showed the Zithari what it truly meant to be a Deathworlder. They were fearless in the face of danger, merciless against enemies, and compassionate toward those who could not protect themselves. They adapted to impossible conditions, turned desperate situations into victories, and never hesitated to act when action was needed. The Zithari, who had once believed their world was lost, began to see a future, not just for survival, but for rebuilding, for hope, and for life beyond fear. The humans had arrived not just as warriors, but as living proof that even in the darkest moments, help could come from the most unlikely and formidable of sources. The battle for Zitharon escalated quickly as the humans pressed forward. The Zithari watched from hidden observation posts, hearts pounding with a mixture of fear, awe, and hope. From the surface, the planet looked like a war-torn nightmare. Buildings reduced to skeletal remains, fires spreading across forests, rivers of molten metal flowing through streets, and toxic clouds choking the sky. Yet amidst the devastation, the human forces moved with calm purpose, as if they were not part of the chaos but its master. Every action seemed deliberate, every movement precise. The Zithari could not take their eyes off these beings, who seemed as unyielding as the planet itself. The Dravkor, now fully aware that the humans were not ordinary reinforcements, began to react with desperation and fury. They launched ambushes from ruined cities, attempting to trap squads of humans in narrow alleys and crumbling towers. They used their advanced weapons to create barriers of fire and poison, hoping to slow down the assault. But the humans adapted immediately. They had trained for every environment imaginable, from freezing wastelands to boiling deserts, from toxic swamps to collapsed cities. Nothing on Zitharon could surprise them. They moved in small units, covering each other and coordinating attacks with a precision that left the Dravkor scrambling. In the heart of the city, a human squad led by Sergeant Cale Brenner approached a sector that had been almost entirely destroyed. Smoke filled the streets and the sound of distant explosions echoed in every corner. Despite the danger, Brenner moved forward, his eyes scanning for threats. His team followed, trusting in their training and instincts. They encountered a group of Dravcor hiding in a partially collapsed building. The enemy expected them to hesitate, but the humans struck immediately. Using a combination of grenades, tactical strikes, and calculated maneuvers, they neutralized the ambush before the Dravcor could react. The Zythari, watching from afar, could hardly comprehend how quickly and efficiently this small team operated. It was unlike anything they had seen before. Organized chaos, deadly but controlled. Meanwhile, on the planet's outskirts, another human team was working to protect civilians trapped in a crumbling district. Families huddled in tunnels and abandoned buildings, terrified of both the Dravcor and the humans, who seemed like monsters to their eyes. The humans moved carefully, lifting debris, providing oxygen, and guiding the Zythari to safety. They carried injured aliens across open streets while bullets and energy blasts tore through the surroundings. Their faces were set in determination, yet their actions were gentle, almost tender when dealing with the civilians. To the Zythari, this duality, ferocity in combat combined with compassion toward the helpless, was astonishing. The skies above Zitharon were a battlefield of their own. Human ships engaged Dravcor vessels in complex maneuvers, weaving between explosions and debris. Fighters darted through the air like predators, dodging enemy fire while targeting the Dravcor with deadly accuracy. Bombers delivered payloads with precise timing, striking enemy strongholds without harming the fragile structures still intact. The Zythari could see flashes of light as ships collided, explosions lighting the clouds, and yet the human fleet adapted, continuing their attack as though nothing could stop them. Every strategy seemed fluid, every decision immediate, every risk calculated. It was a level of tactical genius that even the most advanced Dravcor commanders struggled to counter. On the ground, the human forces encountered situations that would have been catastrophic for any other species. Toxic gas leaks, collapsing buildings, and rogue Dravcor patrols created a deadly maze. Yet the humans moved with an almost instinctual coordination. Engineers worked alongside combat units, reinforcing structures, disarming traps, and redirecting resources to where they were most needed. Medics ran into fire to save lives, pulling Zythari and humans alike from immediate danger. Every soldier understood their role perfectly, operating as part of a larger organism that had one goal: victory and survival. The Zythari, who had never experienced this level of coordination and fearlessness, felt both awe and hope. One critical moment came when a Dravcor commander attempted to trap a large civilian population in the ruins of a floating city. The humans realized the risk immediately. A team led by Captain Ilara Voss was dispatched, moving swiftly across precarious platforms suspended high above the ground. They faced heavy resistance, with the Dravcor using sniper fire and collapsing walkways to slow them down. Yet the humans pressed forward. Voss directed her team with calm authority, taking calculated risks and using every advantage the terrain offered. They reached the civilians just as a massive energy blast threatened to obliterate the area. With precise coordination, the humans evacuated everyone just in time. The Zythari who witnessed this act would later remember it as a miracle, proof that these beings from another world were capable of both incredible violence and extraordinary heroism. Despite these successes, the cost of victory was evident. Many human soldiers were injured or killed, and some ships were damaged beyond repair. The Zythari began to understand that while the humans were powerful, they were not invincible. Yet what set them apart was their resilience. They adapted, learned from mistakes, and continued fighting, seemingly unaffected by fear. Their sheer determination was unlike anything the Zythari had known. Even when faced with overwhelming odds, the humans pressed forward, pushing the Dravcor back, securing key positions, and rescuing those who could not help themselves. The humans also began to implement strategies that the Zythari had never seen. They created safe zones for civilians, established forward command posts, and coordinated air and ground operations seamlessly. Recon drones scouted dangerous areas, detecting threats before they could act. Communication networks ensured that every unit, from the smallest squad to the largest ship, operated in perfect harmony. Even when separated by kilometers, human units knew exactly what each other were doing, moving as one entity. The Zythari, accustomed to slower, more cautious approaches, were astounded by this level of efficiency and foresight. At one point, a massive Dravkor offensive threatened to overwhelm a key sector. Entire human squads were cut off and surrounded, facing certain death. Yet, instead of retreating, they executed a counterattack that would later be studied in human military academies for decades. Using diversionary tactics, ambushes, and synchronized strikes, they turned the tables on the enemy, decimating the Dravkor forces and rescuing their trapped comrades. The Zithari, hidden in shelters, watched in disbelief as what seemed impossible became reality. For the first time, they believed that their world might survive this war. Throughout all this, the humans showed no malice toward the Zithari. They moved with respect for the fragile civilization they were protecting. Engineers stabilized structures rather than demolishing them. Medics tended to every wounded being, and soldiers guided civilians away from danger zones. The Zithari began to see that these humans, though fierce and terrifying in combat, were motivated by a sense of duty and honor. They fought not for conquest or glory, but because someone had asked for help, and in that simple act, they were relentless. As the days passed, the Zithari slowly emerged from hiding, daring to observe the humans more closely. They noted the courage, skill, and precision that defined every action. They saw humans climb through fire, leap across collapsing buildings, and face threats that would have killed anyone else without hesitation. They began to whisper among themselves, realizing that these Deathworlders were not only warriors but saviors in the purest sense. They had come to answer a cry for help, and they were doing so with a dedication that defied imagination. By the end of the third week of human intervention, the battlefield had shifted dramatically. The Dravkor, once dominant, were forced into retreat, their resources dwindling, their morale shattered. Key territories had been secured and civilians were now being moved to safer zones. Yet the humans did not celebrate. They remained vigilant, constantly scanning, preparing for the next assault, and ensuring that no enemy could regain strength. The Zithari had begun to understand the true nature of the Deathworlders. Not only were they deadly warriors, but they were also tireless protectors, able to face unimaginable danger without faltering. The Zithari began to tell stories of what they had witnessed. Children, once terrified of the humans, now spoke of them with reverence. Elders who had lost families began to hope again, inspired by the courage and skill of these alien warriors. And even though the humans remained largely silent, focused on their mission, their presence had changed the culture of the Zithari. They had shown that survival was possible even in the most desperate situations, that courage and strategy could overcome terror, and that help could come from the most unexpected sources. In the final days of Part 3, the Zithari realized that the humans were not merely saviors. They were a force that could redefine the future of their planet. Their methods were strange, terrifying, and at times destructive, but they were effective beyond anything the Zithari had ever imagined. Through fire, chaos, and relentless pressure, the humans were teaching the Zithari a lesson in resilience, courage, and survival. And as the humans continued to push forward, the Zithari dared to hope, not just for survival but for a world that could rise from the ashes with their help. The battle for Zitharon was far from over, but for the first time in months, the Zithari believed that victory was possible, and that their world might yet see peace again. The battle for Zitharon had reached a point where survival was no longer enough. Victory demanded sacrifice. The humans, who had fought with relentless determination for weeks, now faced the ultimate challenge. The Dravkor, cornered and furious, had consolidated their remaining forces around the planet's central cities. Their weapons were more dangerous than ever, enhanced by scavenged human technology and fueled by desperation. For the Zithari watching from hiding, the sight was terrifying. The sky above the capital glowed with fire as enemy ships moved in tight formations, preparing for a final devastating assault. The humans, fully aware of the stakes, did not falter. They moved as one, their battle-hardened fleet ready to meet the enemy head-on. Admiral Reyes convened his senior officers on the bridge of the flagship Resolute Dawn. The atmosphere was tense, every officer aware that the decisions made in the next few minutes could cost hundreds, possibly thousands of lives. Sensors indicated the presence of the Dravkor mothership, a massive vessel at the heart of the enemy fleet, protected by dozens of smaller ships and a network of energy shields. Destroying it was the only way to break the enemy's hold on Zitharon, but it would require immense risk. No human had ever attempted such an operation under these conditions. Yet Reyes did not hesitate. "We either end this now or watch the planet die," he said. His words carried the weight of inevitability, and every officer nodded, prepared to follow him into the impossible. The plan was daring. The humans would divide their forces: a frontal assault to distract the enemy, and a smaller specialized strike team to infiltrate the mothership and deliver a devastating payload. Every step was calculated to maximize efficiency and minimize casualties, but even the most meticulous planning could not remove the danger. The humans knew that this mission would demand the ultimate price. Soldiers, engineers, and pilots steeled themselves, silently acknowledging that not all of them would return. The Zithari, hidden beneath the ruins of their capital, could sense the gravity of the moment, though they did not fully understand the depth of human courage. The first phase began with a coordinated aerial and orbital attack. Human fighters and bombers swept through the Dravkor defenses, dodging energy blasts and debris. The city below erupted in fire and smoke as strategic strikes targeted enemy weapons and supply depots. Ground units moved simultaneously, advancing through ruined streets with relentless precision. They neutralized enemy ambushes, rescued trapped civilians, and secured key positions. The Zithari, who had emerged from hiding, watched in amazement. They could see the humans taking immense risks, moving through collapsing structures, toxic clouds, and direct enemy fire, yet always remaining calm, always advancing. Meanwhile, the specialized strike team prepared for infiltration. Led by Captain Alara Voss, a veteran of countless battles, the team boarded a stealth pod equipped with advanced shielding and propulsion systems. They approached the Dravkor mothership under heavy fire, weaving through a storm of energy blasts. Every second mattered. A single misstep could result in instant destruction. Voss's team moved with flawless coordination, each member anticipating the other's actions. Grenades, hacking devices, and explosive charges were ready. Their mission was simple in words but monumental in execution: destroy the mothership and end the enemy's ability to fight. For the humans, failure was not an option. They carried not only their lives but the fate of an entire alien civilization on their shoulders. Inside the mothership, the environment was hostile beyond comprehension. Alien corridors twisted unpredictably, energy fields pulsed with deadly force, and automated defense systems activated at the slightest movement. The humans adapted instantly. They moved with silent precision, neutralizing threats before they could respond. They used technology, strategy, and sheer physical skill to navigate the maze of corridors and reach the central reactor. Along the way, they encountered Dravkor soldiers in ambushes, yet every attack was met with countermeasures that combined brute force and clever tactics. To the Zithari, who had never seen combat at such an intense level, it was almost incomprehensible. Humans fighting against impossible odds and winning. Step by step, back on the planet's surface, the human fleet continued to engage the Dravkor forces. Explosions rocked the cities, yet the soldiers pushed forward, using every advantage available. They coordinated airstrikes, reinforced positions, and ensured that the enemy could not regroup. Even when facing superior numbers, the humans demonstrated remarkable adaptability. They created traps, flanked enemy positions, and used the environment to their advantage. The Zithari observed that humans seemed to anticipate the enemy's every move, reacting faster than the Dravkor could plan. Each successful maneuver brought hope to the alien survivors below, even as destruction surrounded them. The climax of the mission came when Voss's team reached the reactor chamber. The Dravkor defenses intensified, and every step forward became more dangerous. One soldier was struck down by an energy blast, another narrowly avoided a collapsing platform. Yet they pressed on, understanding that hesitation could mean failure for the entire operation. Captain Voss planted the explosive charges, coordinating with the team to synchronize the detonation. Communication was minimal but perfect, every action precise, every movement purposeful. When the countdown reached 0, the team raced to evacuate, knowing that the blast radius would engulf them if they stayed even a few seconds longer. The explosion that followed was like a second sun erupting in the darkened sky. The mothership was obliterated in a wave of fire and energy, scattering the remaining Dravkor fleet. Ships exploded in orbit, debris rained down across the planet, and a shockwave shook the ground. The Zithari, watching from their shelters, could scarcely comprehend what had happened. The humans had faced certain death, navigated impossible conditions, and succeeded. But the victory came at a terrible cost. Several members of the strike team had not made it out. Entire human squads had been lost during the orbital and ground assaults. The Zythari realized that their salvation had demanded unimaginable sacrifice. As the smoke cleared, the surviving humans regrouped. They treated the wounded, salvaged what they could from damaged ships, and prepared to leave the battlefield. There was no celebration, no fanfare, only the quiet determination that had driven them from the beginning. They had completed their mission, saved the Zythari, and neutralized the Dravkor threat, but the cost weighed heavily on them. Every survivor carried the memory of comrades lost, of battles fought, and of lives sacrificed. To the Zythari, this was a revelation. Humans did not fight for glory, recognition, or personal gain. They fought because it was the right thing to do, because someone had asked for help, and because they could. The aftermath of the battle left Xitharon scarred, but alive. Cities were ruined, landscapes were altered, and the population had been traumatized by months of war. Yet the humans had ensured that enough survived to rebuild. They had taught the Zythari something profound. Courage, strategy, and resilience could overcome even the most overwhelming threats. And while the humans would leave soon, their presence had permanently changed the Zythari. They had witnessed a species that combined unimaginable power with compassion, a species willing to risk everything for others. The Zythari would never forget this lesson. Admiral Reyes surveyed the planet one last time before ordering the fleet to prepare for departure. The human forces had achieved what many had thought impossible. They had destroyed the enemy's central command, protected the remaining population, and stabilized key regions of the planet. Yet Reyes knew that their mission was not about accolades or recognition. They had come because someone had asked for help, and they had done what was necessary. For the humans, this was enough. There was no need for celebration, only the satisfaction of a job completed and lives saved. As the human fleet departed, the Zythari emerged from hiding to assess the damage and begin the slow process of rebuilding. They discovered the extent of the sacrifices made by their saviors. Empty pods, destroyed vehicles, and memorials left behind by soldiers who had given their lives for a species they had never met. The Zythari understood in that moment the true meaning of courage, duty, and sacrifice. The humans had come not to conquer, not to rule, but to save, and they had done so with every ounce of strength and skill they possessed. The planet had survived, and for the first time in months the Zythari could breathe freely. In the years that followed, the story of the humans' intervention became legend. The Zythari told it to their children, describing the terrifying yet awe-inspiring beings who had descended from the stars to save them. They spoke of battles that seemed impossible, of courage that defied logic, and of a sacrifice so great that it could never be repaid. And though the humans had vanished back into the stars, leaving the planet to heal and rebuild, their presence was forever etched into the memory of Xitharon. The Deathworlders had come, fought, bled, and triumphed, not for glory, but because someone had asked for help, and they had answered. The battle for Xitharon was finally over, but the planet was far from healed. Smoke still rose from shattered buildings, rivers were poisoned, and forests that had once glowed with life lay charred and blackened. Yet despite the devastation, a sense of hope had begun to grow among the Zythari. For the first time in months, they could believe that survival was possible. The humans had left their mark, not just in the destruction of the Dravkor forces, but in the courage, determination, and skill they had shown. The Zythari had witnessed something extraordinary. Beings who had come from the stars, risking everything, to save a civilization they had never met, and in doing so, had forever changed the course of their world. In the aftermath, the Zythari began to emerge from hiding. Families reunited in the streets, and elders walked among the ruins, marveling at the sheer scale of the battle they had survived. Everywhere they looked, there were reminders of the humans' presence. Empty landing pods, damaged weapons, and abandoned equipment. It was evidence of sacrifice, proof that beings from another world had given everything to ensure that Xitharon lived. And though the humans had not stayed long, their actions had left a profound impression. The Zythari began to understand that their planet had been saved not by luck or magic, but by courage, discipline, and the unshakable will of those who refused to give up. No matter the odds, as the Zythari rebuilt, they carried with them the lessons learned from their saviors. They began to adopt new strategies for survival. understanding that peace alone was fragile without preparation and courage. Children who had witnessed the humans' bravery grew up with stories of the Deathworlders, imagining beings who could move through fire and destruction without fear, who could save lives in the midst of chaos. The Zithari realized that these humans were more than soldiers. They were symbols of resilience and hope, reminders that life, even in its darkest moments, could be preserved with determination and unity. The humans themselves did not linger to see the full impact of their intervention. Once the Dravkor threat had been neutralized, Admiral Reyes ordered the fleet to depart. The soldiers had completed their mission and their duty was done. There was no celebration, no ceremony, just the quiet acknowledgement of a job fulfilled and lives saved. They had fought with courage and skill, navigated impossible conditions and made sacrifices that would be remembered for generations, yet they did not seek recognition. To the Deathworlders, the measure of success was survival, not glory. They left Zitharon behind, disappearing into the darkness of space, leaving the Zithari to begin the long process of recovery. In the weeks that followed, the Zithari began to rebuild their cities. Using advanced technology salvaged from both human and Dravkor equipment, they worked tirelessly to restore what had been lost. Crumbling buildings were reinforced, energy grids repaired, and medical facilities reopened. The process was slow, and the scars of battle remained visible for decades, but the spirit of the Zithari had been renewed. They no longer saw themselves as helpless victims. They had been witnesses to extraordinary courage, and that experience had changed them. They learned to combine their natural intelligence and compassion with lessons of strategy, resilience and readiness for the unexpected, inspired by the humans who had saved them. The Zithari also honored those who had sacrificed themselves. Memorials were built for the humans who had given their lives during the battle, the strike teams, soldiers, medics, and pilots who had risked everything. Each memorial told a story of bravery in impossible situations, of courage that defied fear, and of the ultimate price paid to protect a civilization that had once seemed doomed. These monuments became a source of inspiration, not just for the Zithari, but for all future generations who would learn about the events that had unfolded on their planet. The humans' actions became a benchmark for heroism, showing that true courage is measured not by the absence of fear, but by the willingness to act despite it. Over time, the story of the Deathworlder fleet spread beyond Zitharon. Other civilizations in the galaxy heard of the humans' arrival, their fearless battle tactics, and their uncompromising determination to save lives. The tale became legend, a race of beings born in harsh conditions, forged by adversity, and capable of both devastating destruction and profound compassion. The Zithari, once isolated and naive, became witnesses to a power and morality that few could imagine. They spoke of humans not as conquerors, but as saviors who operated on principles of honor, duty, and selfless courage. The legend of the Deathworlders served as a reminder that even the most dangerous and unpredictable species could be agents of hope. The impact of the humans' intervention went beyond military success. The Zithari found themselves inspired to explore new possibilities for their own civilization. Technologies introduced during the battle were studied and improved upon. Strategies for defense were taught to future generations, and a new sense of unity began to grow among their people. They had been saved by beings who were fearless in the face of danger, yet they had also learned the importance of preparation, coordination, and strategic thinking. The humans' example became a blueprint for how a civilization could survive and thrive, even when faced with threats far beyond its experience. Despite the horrors they had endured, the Zithari also felt gratitude and connection. They had called for help in their darkest hour, and the response had been extraordinary. Humans had come not to rule or conquer, but to protect. They had fought with unparalleled skill and courage, demonstrating a moral clarity that transcended the chaos of battle. For the Zithari, this was more than salvation. It was a lesson in hope, resilience, and the unexpected forms that help could take. The humans had shown them that even in the direst circumstances, intervention could come from the most unlikely sources, and when it did, it could change the course of history forever. As the planet healed, the Zithari continued to tell the story of the Deathworlders to their children, embedding it into their culture. They spoke of the fearsome beings who had arrived from the stars, how they had fought through fire, poison, and collapsing structures, and how they had saved lives in the face of impossible odds. They described the courage, intelligence, and compassion that had characterized every human action, teaching the next generation that heroism is measured not by power alone, but by the willingness to act selflessly in the service of others. Through these stories, the humans' legacy endured, shaping the values and aspirations of an entire civilization. Though the humans had vanished back into the depths of space, the Zithari could still feel their influence. They had learned to rebuild with courage, to strategize with foresight, and to act decisively in moments of crisis. The survival of Zitharon had become a testament not only to their own resilience but also to the extraordinary intervention of the Deathworlders. The planet, once on the brink of annihilation, now had a future. And in that future, the Zithari carried the memory of a species that had come from the stars, risked everything, and left behind a lasting legacy of hope and courage. In the end, the story of Zitharon and the Deathworlder fleet was remembered not for the destruction, not for the battles fought, but for what it represented: the courage to face impossible odds, the willingness to sacrifice for others, and the unyielding belief that help can arrive even when all seems lost. The Zithari had called into the darkness, and the most dangerous beings in the galaxy had answered. They had been ready to give everything, to endure every hardship and to risk their own lives to save strangers. And in doing so, they had left a mark on Zitharon that would never fade. A lesson in bravery, honor, and the extraordinary power of selfless action. Years later, as the Zithari rebuilt cities and grew new generations, monuments remained to remind them of what had occurred. Schools taught the story of the human intervention as a historical turning point. Artists painted murals of the fearsome armored figures who had moved through smoke and fire to save lives. Children played in streets that had once been battlefields, their laughter a testament to the lives preserved by courage. And among all these reminders, the Zithari carried the understanding that the universe was vast, unpredictable, and filled with beings capable of both destruction and incredible kindness. The humans had shown them that even in the darkest times, hope could arrive with fire in its heart and determination in its soul. The legend of the Deathworlders became a central part of Zithari culture, a story repeated for generations, teaching that the most dangerous and seemingly terrifying beings could also be the greatest allies. They had shown that bravery is not measured by fearlessness, but by action taken in spite of it. That true heroism often requires sacrifice, and that even when a world seems lost, intervention, when it comes from beings of extraordinary resolve, can reshape the future entirely. Zitharon survived not because it was strong alone, but because those who heard its desperate call answered with unmatched courage and relentless determination. The humans had left, but their legacy remained, etched into the history, hearts, and very soul of the Zithari.